Hey, welcome to SpaceX Daily, episode 43. It's July 24th, 2026, and I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Plenty moving across Starship, Falcon, and Starlink today. Tropical Storm Bertha forces Starship Flight 13 to Friday, extending the test campaign's weather-driven pauses at Starbase. Remember, the show covered Starship yesterday. Today's delay moves that forward because the vehicle and Super Heavy booster remain stacked on the orbital launch mount, while teams monitor wind and lightning constraints. SpaceX postponed the Starship Flight 13 attempt from July 24th after forecasters tracked Tropical Storm Bertha moving toward the South Texas coast. This marks the second weather-related slip in the current campaign window, according to Yahoo Tech. The next available opportunity opens Friday once the storm clears the launch corridor. Starship's flight test campaign remains focused on booster catch and full reuse goals, and today's delay tests whether the program can maintain momentum toward orbital refueling demonstrations without resetting hardware timelines. NASA selected Falcon Heavy to launch the NROL-95 space weather mission after repeated delays with the Vulcan Centaur vehicle. The switch returns the payload to a proven heavy lift configuration already cleared for national security flights from Cape Canaveral. Falcon Heavy will carry the mission's instruments focused on solar wind and geomagnetic monitoring. The decision underscores ongoing cadence advantages for the Falcon family on time-sensitive national security manifests per space reporting. Falcon 9 and Heavy reuse counts continue climbing, and this reassignment shows how the program's annual launch rate ceiling directly influences government manifest decisions when newer vehicles slip. Early reports describe the Gen 3 Starlink design as carrying substantially larger phased array antennas and higher power solar arrays sized for Starship deployment. The satellites are expected to support expanded direct-to-cell capacity and improved inter-satellite laser links, according to SDX Central. Production quantities remain tied to Starship flight rate milestones. The upgrade path directly addresses current constellation throughput limits reported in prior coverage. Starlink's constellation expansion and direct-to-cell rollout continue, and Gen 3 hardware moves the open question of subscriber growth and profitability forward by increasing per-satellite capacity once Starship cadence supports higher deployment rates. The article outlines shared infrastructure plans linking XAI training clusters with Starlink backhaul and potential orbital compute nodes. SpaceX hardware is positioned to supply both terrestrial power routing and satellite-based data movement for the combined stack per MEXC reporting. No specific hardware quantities or timelines are disclosed beyond existing Starlink laser link demonstrations. The integration path remains conceptual, pending further Starship-derived capacity. Traders noted continued pressure on competing launch and spectrum stocks after SpaceX extended its Falcon 9 manifest lock on certain commercial slots. The freeze limits near-term availability for rival operators seeking secondary launch capacity, according to StockTwit's coverage. Retail commentary centered on the competitive asymmetry created by SpaceX's high launch cadence. The piece details how XAI's model development now draws on engineering telemetry and orbital data pathways supplied through SpaceX systems. Integration includes potential use of Starlink for low-latency inference routing between ground clusters and future space-based nodes per QZ.com. No dollar figures or hardware allocations appear in the reporting. The arrangement remains at the planning stage. Elon Musk referenced an upcoming Grok 4.6 model at roughly 2 trillion parameters during a public exchange comparing capabilities with Chinese competitors. The post did not include training timeline or cluster details, according to finance.bigo coverage. Capability claims remain unverified pending release. The report explores how orbital compute concepts could increase demand for high-bandwidth, radiation-tolerant GPU architectures supplied by NVIDIA. SpaceX's Starlink laser network is cited as the potential data fabric connecting ground training runs to on-orbit inference nodes per AOL.com. No contracts or deployment schedules are confirmed. The discussion stays at the conceptual level. Retail traders on StockTwits discussed whether a successful Starship Flight 13 could lift SPCX back toward $150, citing recent share weakness tied to test delays. Community posts highlighted the NROL 95 mission reassignment to Falcon Heavy as evidence of sustained national security reliance on existing SpaceX vehicles, while Vulcan remains grounded. Forum threads examined the proposed Gen 3 Starlink antenna scale-up, with amateur analysts comparing expected beam counts to current V2 mini designs. Worth keeping an eye on is whether internal timelines for orbital data centers and lunar infrastructure align with public statements, noting repeated slips in Starship test cadence. The piece cites the gap between announced milestones and demonstrated hardware performance, according to AOL.com. Resolution would require visible progress on the next 2 flight tests and concrete orbital refueling demonstrations. On the AI front, Musk referenced a 2 trillion parameter Grok 4.6 model in direct comparison to China's Kimi K3, with no training cluster size disclosed. xAI's integration with SpaceX systems was described as relying on Starlink laser links for potential low-latency routing between ground clusters and future orbital nodes. NVIDIA's position in orbital data center concepts was tied to radiation-tolerant GPU demand, with Starlink positioned as the interconnect fabric. From an engineering standpoint, launch commit criteria for orbital-class vehicles rest on a narrow set of atmospheric variables that directly affect structural loads and control authority. Wind shear, lightning probability, and upper-level winds each impose hard limits because the vehicle must maintain a stable trajectory, while its engines deliver maximum thrust through the dense lower atmosphere. Tropical Storm Bertha's approach forces a multi-day stand-down because even modest increases in cross-range wind can exceed the gimbal authority margins designed into the booster's flight control system. The decision to scrub therefore protects both the test article and the ground infrastructure from an unrecoverable trajectory deviation. Starship's current weather tolerance is set by the same first principles trade that shaped its tank geometry and engine count. Larger propellant loads give the vehicle enough impulse to reach the required velocity even after a late-day scrub recovery, yet they also increase the mass that must be steered through gusts. The design therefore accepts a narrower launch envelope in exchange for simpler tank manufacturing and higher payload fraction once the weather window opens. This choice keeps the idiot index, the ratio of finished vehicle cost to raw propellant and metal, lower than a more weather-hardened but heavier architecture would allow. The raw inputs of stainless steel sheet, liquid oxygen, and methane set a floor cost that reuse and rapid iteration aim to approach, but the added mass margin for weather resilience would raise that floor by increasing both material volume and the energy needed to lift it. The next engineering observable is how quickly the stacked vehicle can be returned to a launch-ready state once Bertha clears. Pad systems must re-verify propellant conditioning, avionics health, and tower interfaces after the storm passes. Any extension beyond Friday would indicate whether the current ground support architecture can sustain the rapid turn cadence required for the orbital refueling and booster catch milestones still ahead in the campaign. Launch infrastructure readiness at Starbase directly limits how many attempts can fit inside a given weather window, and today's delay highlights the interaction between external constraints and the pad tower systems that set the practical flight rate. And a quick market note, SPCX is at $118.24, up 1.8%. Before we go, Starship's next clear window will show whether the test cadence can absorb repeated weather holds without resetting the reuse timeline. And that's a wrap on today's SpaceX developments. SPCX is trading at $118.24, up 1.8%. Share this with a fellow spaceflight fan if you found it useful, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time. Quick tip from the network, try Planetarian Daily next. Daily breakthroughs in science, health, and longevity. Every NARA Network show is free at naranetwork.com. And on the website, every episode's visuals live in our free image gallery at naranetwork.com/gallery. royalty-free under Creative Commons, download with attribution. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.